I dropped the groceries the second I saw it. My heart stopped cold, my legs already sprinting across the grass before my mind could catch up. There it was, swinging grotesquely from the branches of the old maple tree near the park bench, lit by the early evening sun like some twisted piece of art. Emma's wheelchair, her custom-painted, motorized wheelchair, the one that gave her freedom, was dangling by its wheels from a rope, twisting slowly in the breeze. For a moment, my brain refused to believe what my eyes were screaming. I thought I was hallucinating. But then I saw the note, taped to the seat back, scrawled in thick black marker like a childish taunt. SHE, doesn't need it if she can crawl. My throat tightened. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred, not from tears but from fury. The kind that simmers just beneath your skin until it explodes like wildfire. I tore the wheelchair down with shaking hands, rage and disbelief crashing into each other inside me. The seat was scratched. The armrests were cracked. It had clearly been dragged, abused, humiliated, mocked. It wasn't just vandalism. It was a message, an attack, a calculated strike meant to wound my daughter deeper than bruises ever could. And then I heard it, soft crying, behind the bushes. I ran and found Emma curled on the grass, her elbows scraped raw, her legs twisted under her, dirt smeared across her pajamas. She had tried to crawl home. Crawl, because her chair, the one she depended on to move, to live, was hanging in a tree like garbage. Her face was red and wet with tears, but when she saw me, she looked ashamed. Ashamed, as if she had done something wrong. "Mommy," she whispered, "I didn't mean to make anyone mad." That was when I broke, not in defeat, but in rage. I held her close, kissed her muddy forehead, and whispered, "No one is ever going to hurt you like this again. I promise." Because I already knew who did it. I knew that smirk, that handwriting, that cruelty. It was Karen. And this time she went too far. My name is Renee Caldwell, and I have one daughter, Emma. She's 11 years old and the bravest soul I've ever known. Emma was born with spina bifida, a condition that left her lower spine undeveloped. The doctors said she'd never walk. They told us she might never gain full control of her lower limbs, and that she'd probably spend her life relying on others to move, to bathe, to survive. But they never factored in Emma. They didn't account for her stubbornness, her endless determination, or that fierce little spark behind her eyes that told the world, "I'm not done yet." From the beginning, she challenged every limitation. She learned to transfer from her bed to the couch on her own. She figured out how to get dressed without assistance. She turned her wheels into wings, zipping through the halls of our tiny apartment like she was born to roll. Her first wheelchair was this clunky, heavy manual thing the hospital gave us, but she made it dance. She crashed into walls, laughed about it, and painted racing stripes down the side with glitter glue. When she turned 7, I surprised her with her first motorized chair. She cried, real, full-body sobs. "It's like I have superpowers now," she squealed. And in a way, she did. That chair gave her independence. It allowed her to keep up with other kids, to move freely without needing help every 5 seconds. She could go to the park, get her own juice from the fridge, even Zoom race with her cousins down the sidewalk. She loved the sound it made, the gentle hum of movement, the quiet whir of wheels. To Emma, it wasn't noise. It was freedom. For years, we lived in a cramped apartment downtown. The building wasn't accessible. The elevator broke every other week. The neighbors meant well, but didn't understand. Emma's school was across town, and every commute felt like a battle. I worked nights at the local clinic and did home nursing shifts on weekends just to save enough for something better. So, when I finally found the listing for a small home in a quiet, well-managed community in Harper Creek, it felt like divine intervention. The streets were smooth and wide. The sidewalks had curb cuts. There was a neighborhood park just 3 houses down. Most importantly, it had space. A front yard where Emma could draw with sidewalk chalk. A driveway she could navigate on her own. A bedroom with big windows and sunlight pouring in. It was our dream. A fresh start. Emma was ecstatic when we moved in. She decorated her new room with string lights and glow-in-the-dark stars. She rolled herself from room to room, exploring every inch with giddy excitement. On our first weekend, she baked cookies with me and delivered them to the neighbors. Dozens of little paper plates with sugar cookies shaped like stars and hearts. She attached hand-drawn, "Hi, I'm Emma," cards to each one. She wanted to belong. So did I. The neighborhood seemed friendly enough. People waved. A few even complimented Emma's decorations. The HOA president, a woman named Karen, introduced herself the first morning we arrived. She wore a pastel sweater and a stiff smile and commented immediately on the wheelchair. "Oh," she said, "we've never had one of those here before." I wasn't sure what she meant, so I smiled and moved on. I told myself she was just awkward, that people say things they don't mean when they're surprised or uncomfortable. But Emma noticed. She always does. That night she asked me, "Mommy, do you think they like me here?" I kissed her forehead and said, "Of course they do. What's not to like?" She beamed. "Good. I really want this to be home." And for a little while it was. We had dinner on the porch. We met a sweet lady named Miss Carroll who gave Emma a flower pot to paint. We had movie nights, we rolled to the park, and Emma even drew a giant rainbow in chalk across our driveway with the words, "Hello, neighbors." It was the first time in years I felt like I could breathe, but what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that behind the forced smiles and HOA rules was a brewing storm. That some people in this well-managed community didn't see my daughter as a bright, brave little girl. They saw her as a problem. And one of them, Karen, was about to show us just how cruel that kind of hatred could be. It didn't take long for the warm smiles to cool. The first red flag came just a week after we moved in. Emma was rolling back from a mailbox, just a short trip at the end of the driveway, when Karen appeared out of nowhere. She was walking her perfectly groomed Pomeranian, wearing her usual pastel sweater, pearl earrings, and an expression that always felt one wrong word away from frown. She smiled thinly and waved, but instead of saying hello, she asked, "Does that chair have to make so much noise?" I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry." She tilted her head, all faux innocence. "Oh, it's just the clanking. That metallic sound when it rolls over the sidewalk cracks. It echoes quite a bit, you know. It's a peaceful community, and some of our residents are very sensitive to sound." I glanced at Emma, who had stopped just behind me. She was staring at Karen, puzzled, her little hand frozen on the joystick. I forced a polite smile and said, "It's just the wheels. They rattle on the sidewalk. Sometimes we'll be mindful." Karen smiled wider, but her eyes didn't. That would have been the end of it, just a cranky neighbor with too much time. But the next morning, a formal notice was taped to our door. It was from the HOA. Subject, exterior modification violation details. Unauthorized wheelchair ramp visible from the street. All exterior alterations must be pre-approved. Removal requested within 14 days. I stared at the paper, stunned. The ramp in question was a small, portable aluminum access, ramp Emma, used to get from the driveway into the front door. It wasn't permanent. It wasn't installed or drilled. It folded up at night. We had explicitly asked about it before moving in, and the realtor had confirmed it wouldn't be a problem. But now it was a violation. I wrote a respectful email explaining the ramp's purpose, offering to submit any documentation needed, and even attached photos showing that it was temporary. No response. Instead, 2 days later, another notice arrived, this time about safety hazards created by loose objects on the property. The only object was the ramp, that and Emma's sidewalk chalk drawings, which had mysteriously been washed away overnight. Emma was confused. "Why can't I draw anymore?" she asked. I was going to write "Have a good day" for Miss Carroll. I didn't know what to say. Because how do you explain to an 11-year-old that her wheelchair and her joy were being treated like a nuisance? Things escalated quickly after that. Karen began hovering. She started walking her dog right past our house multiple times a day, sometimes pausing to stare at Emma's chair, like it was leaking oil on her perfect HOA-approved lawn. One morning, as Emma rolled herself to the end of the driveway to catch the school van, Karen stopped and said, "I've been meaning to ask, has she ever tried to walk?" I froze. Emma blinked. "What?" I asked, my voice sharp. Karen chuckled softly, brushing her hand through her salon-styled hair. Oh, no offense, of course. It's just, I've seen programs on TV. Physical therapy can do wonders these days. Maybe she just needs a little discipline. Sometimes children rely on those devices more than they need to. Emma's eyes dropped to her lap. My blood boiled. Emma's condition is permanent, I said slowly. She doesn't rely on her wheelchair. It's how she lives. Karen just nodded, as if she hadn't heard me at all, and continued walking. From that point on, it felt like we were under surveillance. The HOA sent letters about mechanical device activity after hours, citing vague complaints about noise. Emma liked to wheel into the kitchen for a glass of water before bed. She always moved slowly, quietly, and never after 10 p.m. But apparently, even the soft hum of her motor was too much for our peaceful community. Emma started asking permission before leaving her room. Can I go now? Or is it too late? She'd whisper. She began skipping her evening water, scared that someone would complain. One afternoon, I found her sitting on her bedroom floor, trying to transfer into her chair without letting it roll. What are you doing? I asked. She looked up with wide, tired eyes, just trying to be quieter. I don't want to get us kicked out. That hit me like a punch in the chest. My daughter, my fiercely independent, sunshine-filled Emma, was being shamed into thinking she was a problem, into believing that her existence was offensive. I reached out to the HOA directly. No response. I attended the next monthly meeting. Karen, of course, presided like a queen before her court. When I raised the issue, citing the targeted complaints and growing hostility, she smiled and said, "The board has the right to uphold standards. We treat everyone equally." Do you? I asked, because no one else here has their child's drawings erased or their front door ramp classified as a violation. Karen only replied with a shrug and a soft, venomous laugh. Well, perhaps your daughter's situation is more noticeable. By the end of that meeting, I knew we were in trouble, not just because of the rules or the notices or the silence from the other board members, but because we were being quietly pushed out, and Karen wasn't going to stop until we were gone. The afternoon it happened started like any other. Emma had just gotten home from school and was working on a painting in the living room, watercolors and glitter pens all over the floor. She loved painting flowers, especially the kind we saw on our walks through the neighborhood. I told her I'd be gone for 20 minutes tops. I was just running to the store to grab milk, bread, and her favorite strawberry yogurt. She smiled and said, "Okay, but hurry back. I want to show you my sunset." I kissed her on the forehead, told her I loved her, and left. It was a bright, breezy afternoon, the kind of day that should feel safe, ordinary, peaceful. When I returned, nothing looked out of place at first, until I noticed the front door was slightly open. Panic pricked at the edge of my brain, but I pushed it down. Maybe the wind caught it. Maybe Emma had rolled outside to look at the garden like she sometimes did. But when I stepped inside, the house was eerily quiet. No humming wheels. No giggling. No, "Mommy, look what I made." And worst of all, no wheelchair. Her chair was gone. I dropped the grocery bags, my heart immediately pounding in my ears. "Emma?" I called out, trying to stay calm. No response. I checked every room, kitchen, hallway, her bedroom, nothing. Then I saw the back door was open, and beyond it, in the distance, I could see the small park in the center of the neighborhood. That's when I saw it. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It looked like some twisted Halloween prank. Emma's wheelchair, her bright purple custom-designed motorized wheelchair, was hanging from the branches of the old oak tree in the park, dangling by the footrests, tied with thick yellow rope swaying, like some macabre ornament. And then I saw the note, taped crudely to the seat, written in thick black marker, "SHE doesn't need it if she can crawl." The world tilted. I froze, completely paralyzed. My vision narrowed to a tunnel, and all I could hear was my heartbeat thundering in my chest. For a full 5 seconds, I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. And then I ran. I tore the wheelchair down with shaking hands, practically ripping the rope apart. The seat was scratched and dented. The control panel was cracked. The paint Emma had decorated it with her little glitter stickers and star decals had been deliberately peeled off. I stood there holding the twisted, damaged frame in my hands and felt something inside me snap. Then I heard crying. Soft, strained sobs coming from behind the hedges near the park bench. I ran, heart in my throat, and there she was, Emma. She was crumpled on the grass, dirt smeared across her face, her knees scraped raw, her arms trembling as she tried to drag herself forward. She was in her pajamas, her painting shirt, no shoes, just tears and bruises and a desperate look in her eyes when she saw me. "Mommy," she gasped. I tried to come get you." I dropped to my knees and pulled her into my arms. "I've got you, baby. I've got you." She clung to me like she was drowning. "I didn't mean to be bad," she whispered. "I just wanted to go outside." My throat closed up. I couldn't speak. I held her tighter, rocking her gently, tears burning down my cheeks as I looked around, and realized we weren't alone. There were people watching, across the street, on porches, from windows, some standing, some pretending to garden, others peeking through blinds. They had seen. They knew something happened, but no one moved. No one came forward. Not a single person helped. Not a single voice cried out in outrage. They just watched, silent and still, like spectators at a zoo. I carried Emma inside, cleaned her cuts, got her in fresh clothes, and held her until she fell asleep from exhaustion and shock. And then, when I was sure she was okay, I made the calls, first to the HOA, then to the police. The HOA answered after the third try. When I demanded an explanation, the woman on the phone said flatly, "We don't have proof of who damaged your property, ma'am. If you believe someone violated community guidelines, you're welcome to submit a formal complaint." "I know who did this," I snapped. "Karen. Everyone knows." The woman paused, then said in a clipped tone, "Unless you have photographic or video evidence, we cannot take action against any individual. We don't enforce hearsay." I hung up before I screamed. The police were kinder but limited. They took photos, filed a report, said it would be difficult to press charges without witnesses or surveillance. "It's despicable," the officer admitted, "but unless someone confesses, there's not much we can do." I showed him a note. He shook his head, jaw clenched. "If someone did this to my kid," but he didn't finish the sentence. No one did. That night, Emma barely ate. She didn't ask for her paints. She didn't even ask about her wheelchair. She just stared at the ceiling and asked quietly, "Do you think I'd be better if I didn't need it?" My heart broke 100 times in one breath. I sat beside her and held her hand. "No, baby, you don't need change. They do." But I could see the doubt had already taken root. She had been attacked, not just physically but emotionally. Her identity, her independence, her dignity had been strung up like a joke. And the people who were supposed to keep this community safe did nothing. Karen didn't just vandalize a piece of equipment. She violated a child, her freedom, her confidence, her right to exist unapologetically. And that was the last day I stayed silent. Because if no one else was going to fight for Emma, I would. And this time, I wasn't playing by their rules anymore. Emma didn't speak for 2 days. She wasn't angry. She wasn't crying. She wasn't asking questions. She was just quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't make noise, but swallows the entire house. The kind of silence that has weight to it. I'd never seen her like that before, not even after surgeries or hard diagnoses. This wasn't the silence of fear. This was the silence of someone who'd lost something and didn't know how to ask for it back. Her wheelchair sat in the corner of the living room like a ghost. I had tried to clean it, buff out the scratches, reattach the joystick casing, but it still looked violated, stripped of its spirit, like it had been through a war and wasn't sure it wanted to keep going. Kind of like Emma. She stayed in bed that whole time. Didn't want her paints. Didn't want the TV. Just curled up, barely moving. And when I offered to help her into the chair again, she whispered, "No." I knelt beside her bed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sweetheart, it's okay. I fixed it. It still works. We can go to the park." "I don't want to go to the park." "Okay, maybe we could just—" "I don't want the chair, Mommy." That stopped me cold. Why not? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She looked at me then, not with anger, with something worse, with shame. Maybe they're right, she said, eyes wide and wounded. Maybe if I didn't use it so much, they wouldn't hate us. Maybe if I tried harder. My daughter, who had spent her entire life learning to function in a world that was never built for her, was blaming herself for being attacked, for needing a tool to live, a tool that had been yanked away from her and hung like a trophy by someone who saw her mobility as a crime. And I broke. I tried to hold it in, I really did. I wanted to be strong, to shield her from it. But I couldn't. The tears came fast, hot, and ugly. I turned away at first, covering my face, but she saw me. She reached out and touched my hand. "Mommy, are you mad at me?" "No, baby," I choked out. "I'm mad at them. I'm mad that you think you have to change for people who don't even deserve to know your name." She didn't say anything. She just squeezed my hand a little tighter. After she fell asleep, I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for hours. I replayed everything, every note, every complaint, every forced smile, every insult disguised as a suggestion. I thought about the neighbors who looked the other way, the HOA who hid behind rules, the police who said they couldn't help. And I thought about Karen, her smug little smile, her clipped words, her ever-present clipboard. They had stolen something from Emma, her joy, her sense of safety, her voice, and I had let them. That was my breaking point. I realized I had spent too much time trying to fit in, trying to keep the peace, trying to be respectful. But what good is respect when it's one-sided? What good is peace when it's built on silence and submission? I had tried their way. The emails, the meetings, the patience. Now, I was going to try mine. I wasn't just a mother. I was a nurse, a fighter, a woman who had survived the loss of a husband, the weight of single motherhood, and the brutal chaos of emergency rooms. And I knew how to document injuries. I knew how to file complaints that couldn't be ignored. I knew the ADA inside and out. I knew people in the legal system, and I knew the media loved a story with a villain. I didn't need their permission. I needed results. So I got up, wiped my face, and pulled out a new notebook. I titled the first page, HOA Harassment, Timeline of Abuse. Then I opened my laptop. I created a folder, Karen Files. I uploaded photos of the chair hanging from a tree. I scanned the note. I added screenshots of every HOA notice, every message, every email they had failed to reply to. I flagged witness names. I saved video footage from my security camera. I didn't know exactly where this fight would take me, but I knew I wasn't backing down again, because my daughter should never feel ashamed for existing. She should never feel like she has to crawl to be accepted. And from that moment forward, I made a vow. If no one else would protect her, I would burn their rules to the ground to make space for her wings. The fight began in silence, at my kitchen table, under the flickering light above the stove, long after Emma had fallen asleep. Her wheelchair sat beside me, repaired as best as I could manage, but still scarred from what Karen had done. I placed my hand on the armrest for a long moment, steadying myself. Then I turned on my laptop and started what would become the single most important project of my life. I opened a blank spreadsheet and titled it HOA Harassment. Full timeline, I listed every incident in order. The first noise complaint, the ramp violation notice, the erased chalk drawings, the pool access denial, the gaslighting HOA meeting, the missing wheelchair. And now the attack. The image of Emma's wheelchair swaying in the tree still haunted me, but now it fueled me. I refused to let that become the end of her story. Next, I created a file folder on my desktop, Karen Files. Inside, I dropped photos of a damaged chair, close-ups of the scraped paint, the note taped to it like a trophy. I added scans of every HOA warning we'd received. I flagged the ones signed by Karen herself. I compiled screenshots of our email exchanges and even printed a copy of the police report. I gathered it all like a case file, like evidence I could hand to someone, anyone who might have the power to do something about this. But it still wasn't enough. I needed proof, undeniable visual proof. So I turned to my home's security camera system. It wasn't fancy, but it was motion sensitive. We had installed it years ago back in our old apartment building when car break ins became common. I kept it more for peace of mind than anything else. I had almost forgotten about it until now. I pulled up the logs from the day of the incident, scrolling through, fast forwarding, scanning for movement. At first, nothing. Hours of stillness. But then a figure walking up our driveway, wearing a visor and hoodie. It was grainy but clear enough to recognize her posture, her stride, her smug arrogance. Karen. She wasn't alone. She was pulling something behind her. Frame by frame, I watched in horror as she removed Emma's wheelchair from the porch and wheeled it down the street like stolen luggage. Then a second clip, Karen dragging the chair into the park, tossing a rope over a branch like she'd done it before. She looked around, quickly, like a teenager about to TP a house. Then she hoisted the wheelchair off the ground, slapped the note to it, and walked away. She didn't rush. She strutted. I downloaded the footage, made backup copies, and emailed one to myself. Then I called a woman named Carla Mendez, a civil rights attorney who specialized in ADA violations and disability discrimination. She had given a talk at our hospital once, and I remembered how sharp, fierce, and no-nonsense she had been. She answered on the third ring. Carla Mendez speaking. My name is Renee Caldwell. My daughter uses a wheelchair. Our HOA just allowed her chair to be vandalized, and I have video of the president hanging it in a tree like it was garbage. There was a pause. Then she said, "Send me everything." I emailed the folder immediately. 10 minutes later, she called back. This is one of the worst ADA harassment cases I've seen in a decade, she said. We're suing the HOA, and we're suing Karen personally. From that moment, everything shifted. Carla took over the legal strategy, filing formal ADA complaints with both the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Department of Justice. We filed a civil lawsuit for harassment, discrimination, and emotional endangerment of a disabled minor. The documents were airtight, the video bulletproof. And Carla? She was a bulldog in a blazer. But I didn't stop there. I called a local journalist I knew, Jessica Lynn, who had covered human interest stories around the city. I sent her the video, the pictures, the timeline. I told her everything. She called me that same night, her voice shaking. I want to run this on the front page. Within 48 hours, the story went live. Mother accuses HOA president of vicious ADA attack on disabled girl's wheelchair, subheadline. Security footage shows wheelchair hung in tree like trash, community in shock. It exploded. By day 3, it had hit regional news. Then national blogs picked it up. Disability rights organizations shared it. Influencers reposted it. A Twitter thread titled, "She Just Wanted to Go Outside," featured Emma's smile and a still frame of her chair hanging lifelessly in that tree. It went viral, over 100,000 shares. Hashtags trended. Hashtag Justice for Emma, hashtag HOA Horror, hashtag My Wheels, My Rights. People from all over the country began emailing me, messaging Emma, parents of kids in wheelchairs, veterans, nurses, teachers. One woman in Oregon wrote, "We've lived under HOA harassment for years, but we were too scared to speak. You gave us a voice." Emma's eyes lit up reading the messages. For the first time in weeks, she smiled. Karen, meanwhile, went into hiding. Her porch was egged. Protesters showed up outside her house with signs that said, "Wheels are not optional, and shame on you, Karen." She called the police, ironically, for harassment. The HOA board panicked. They tried to distance themselves, issued a flimsy statement. "We do not condone vandalism or bullying of any kind. We are reviewing this matter internally." Carla laughed when she saw it. Translation, we're lawyering up. By the end of the week, we had filed a motion for an emergency injunction to prevent further retaliation and forced a public hearing before the city's Civil Rights Committee. Subpoenas were served. Karen could no longer hide behind fake smiles and HOA policy sheets. And through it all, I stood tall. Tired, yes. Worn down, absolutely. But never alone again. Because this wasn't just a fight for Emma anymore. It was a fight for Every child who'd been told they were too noisy, too visible, too different to belong. And I wasn't just fighting back. I was winning. ChatGPT said the hearing was packed. Every chair in the municipal chamber was filled, with more people standing in the back, whispering, murmuring, eyes trained on the long table where the HOA board sat like cornered animals. News cameras flanked both sides of the room. Reporters tapped quietly on keyboards. A buzz of tension lingered in the air, thick and electric. This wasn't just a local dispute anymore. This was public. The city had taken over the investigation under ADA and Fair Housing Act violations. And this time, Karen couldn't hide behind her sweater sets and smug HOA smile. Emma sat beside me, her hand tucked in mine, her new chair gleaming with purple flame decals donated by a disability rights organization that had flown in just to support her. She wore her favorite blue headband and a tiny silver bracelet that read strong. Her chin was high, her eyes steady. Karen sat 3 chairs down from the center, flanked by her lawyer and a visibly uncomfortable HOA treasurer. She looked smaller than usual, like her crisp suit couldn't protect her from what was coming. Then they played the footage. Silence fell as the screen lit up. Grainy black and white footage of Karen entering our property at twilight, dragging Emma's wheelchair down the street and stringing it up in the park tree. The camera caught everything, her casual glance around, the gleam of satisfaction as she taped the cruel note to the chair. The whole room watched her hang that chair like a predator displaying a kill. Gasps echoed through the chamber. One of the board members turned visibly pale. Another, a man who had said nothing for months, stood abruptly and walked out. He couldn't take it. The chairwoman, overseeing the hearing, turned to Karen. "Do you deny that this is you in the footage?" Karen's lawyer tried to object, citing privacy and context, but the chairwoman overruled him. Yes or no? Karen didn't answer. She stared down at the table, lips pressed in a tight, bitter line. Her hands trembled slightly. They handed me the microphone. I stood slowly, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "This wasn't vandalism," I said, sweeping my eyes across the room. "This was a message. It said, your daughter isn't welcome here. It said, her existence is a disruption." Karen didn't just hang a chair. She humiliated a child. She told my little girl to crawl, and you all let her. A woman in the audience clapped, then another. The sound grew, hesitant at first, but steady, applause not for vengeance, but for truth. The city board read out the results of their investigation. The HOA had failed to uphold fair housing standards. Karen's actions constituted direct ADA discrimination and harassment. A civil fine of $275,000 would be levied against the HOA. Karen Harper was personally named in the suit and barred from holding any position in an HOA housing board or community council in the state. A formal letter of apology to be issued to Emma by the full board, mandatory ADA and anti-discrimination training for all HOA members, and lastly, the court recommended that Karen undergo psychological counseling as part of restorative justice for her treatment of a disabled minor. Karen didn't speak, not once. But as we gathered our things to leave, a young woman from the press approached her and held out a recorder. She asked, "Karen, do you think this was funny?" Karen looked up, eyes red, face blotchy, and finally said something. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't say I was wrong. She said nothing, just silence. And that was her answer. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, supporters holding signs that read, "Wheels are not shameful, HOAs must change, and we stand with Emma." Dozens of families were there, some in wheelchairs, others with walking sticks, crutches, or therapy dogs. A group of children rolled up holding a giant poster that said, "Emma is our hero." Emma's eyes lit up. She smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. A local business had donated her a brand new chair, custom-fitted, sleeker, faster, with Emma's name engraved on the back in silver script. When she saw it, she cried. And for once, the tears weren't from shame. They were from pride. I knelt beside her and whispered, "They tried to take something from you, but you didn't let them." And Emma, still teary-eyed but smiling, whispered back, "I want to race it down the hill tomorrow." That's when I knew we'd won. Not just the case, but our place, our dignity, our peace. The sun was beginning to set as Emma wheeled herself through the park, the same park where not long ago her chair had hung from a tree like a cruel joke. But now, things were different. Her new wheelchair glinted in the golden light, custom painted with bright purple, pink, and silver swirls, just the way she had asked. Her name was engraved on the back, Emma Strong, in bold, defiant letters. She didn't hesitate as she rolled across the pavement, past the playground, past the oak tree where her old chair had been strung up. She even paused beside it, not in fear but in triumph. "I want to plant flowers here," she said. "Something that grows." I just nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Children waved to her now. Neighbors who once looked away were now offering help, asking questions, smiling genuinely. And beside the sidewalk, under the tree where so much pain had once been inflicted, a brand new ramp had been installed, wide, smooth, permanent. A small bronze plaque read, "In honor of Emma Caldwell, because everyone deserves access." Emma rolled up it effortlessly, spinning at the top, arms lifted like a champion crossing a finish line. I stood back and watched her, strong, radiant, free, and I felt something shift inside me. Peace, not because everything was perfect, but because we had claimed our place. We had faced cruelty, injustice, and silence, and we didn't crawl. We rose. That night, as I tucked her into bed, Emma looked at me and whispered, "I'm glad I didn't stay afraid, Mommy." I smiled and kissed her forehead. "Me too, baby. Me too." They tried to take away her dignity, but she found it tenfold. Just when I thought the battle was over, when Emma was finally safe, seen, and respected, a new envelope arrived. Different HOA, new neighborhood, but the same sickening pattern. Inside was a letter that read, "We've received multiple complaints. Your daughter's presence has become disruptive to the atmosphere we strive to maintain." They used bigger words this time, fancier paper. But the message was the same: she doesn't belong here. I looked at that letter, then I looked at Emma, laughing, drawing sunflowers in chalk on the sidewalk. And I knew they're not done, and neither am I. Subscribe to the HOA stories for more real-life confrontations, hard-won victories, and the truth behind America's prettiest neighborhoods. If you or someone you love has ever been shamed, silenced, or pushed out by a homeowners association, drop your story in the comments. Because your voice matters, and this fight, it's just getting started.